Very well.
Just the first light. Leave the first one up. Perfect. Okay, you can turn it off. Go ahead. Look. I'm trying to. Yeah, that'll work. That works fine.
Good morning. We welcome this morning. We welcome Kathryn. I'm not sure what I can say about you, so
You can say
I've been told I can't say certain things.
you can say it. You
She's
can't.
brought up. She will introduce herself. We are happy to have her here. We're arranged a little different. We had a wedding rehearsal dinner here Friday night, so it's a little different. So please grab a cup of coffee, come and sit down. We have plenty of seats up front. Come on down. Thank you for being here.
I promise I don't bite. Now, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. Please feel free if at any point you want to. You're not constrained to these tables. I do not have an activity that requires you to be at these tables. I used to be a trainer, so there will be some audience participation requested, not required. But I just want to give everybody a chance to get everything. So while we're doing that, I will introduce myself. I am a cradle Episcopalian. I'm Elizabeth Maxwell's daughter. As you saw in the program, her birthday is this coming Tuesday, so Mardi Gras is a very big deal for our family, which is part of the reason why I'm in town. So I'm really grateful to Father Michael and Father Tom for asking me to come here and speak about my year while I was volunteering in the Middle East. So I'm really excited my mom's finally getting converted to the Episcopal Church. I went to her confirmation class when I was here for Thanksgiving. I think we can go ahead and get started. Again, happy to be here. So I could spend weeks, and my family has listened to weeks, of all of the lessons that I learned while I was volunteering in Israel. But we don't have weeks, we have 45 minutes, and I know people probably are going to have questions, so I'm going to do my best to focus on sort of one aspect of what I learned, and that is being a minority. I think that this is a lens that we need to view the situation in Israel and Palestine, and it's one that people don't talk about, either because they are a minority and they know what it means, or they've never been a minority or never thought of themselves as a minority and haven't really seen the situation through that lens. So that's what we'll be talking about. I did spend a whole 10 months there working as a volunteer with the Pilgrims of Italy. It's a US-based NGO, non-governmental organization that focuses on helping fund a school in northern Galilee that's connected to the Melkite Church, that's the Greek Catholic Church. We don't think about Eastern Christianity as a big deal over here in the U.S., but most of the Christians that you run into in the Holy Land are in fact Eastern Christians. They're either Orthodox or they're Greek Catholic. There are a couple of Roman Catholics, but everything's a bit more focused towards the East because that's where they are. So I want you all to think about a time in your life where you might have been a minority. Maybe you were the one woman who didn't have children at a gathering. Maybe you were the one Yankee in a small southern town, like my stepfather, who volunteered for that, oddly enough. Maybe you were the only single parent at a school teacher conference meeting. But if you could all just think about a time where you felt like a fish out of water, and I'll ask if anybody is willing to share that. And if not, if you could just nod that you kind of have that. I'm like, all right, I see some nodding heads. Don't have to share. So think about, how did that feel for you? What did that feel like? Frustrating.
Anxiety.
Isolated.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yes. Lots of anxiety. Maybe a little fearful.
Wondering what collards were.
Okay. Questioning. Confused. Confused about what seemed normal to everybody else because it wasn't your experience.
Or better yet, what's the big deal about college?
Yes. I have to admit, I will be really honest in front of this room, I don't like collards. I've come out and said it. I've gotten a lot of grief my entire life. They've told me it doesn't make me less Southern necessarily. You have not talked to my mother. So my mom's a big collard fan. So, you know, when you look up at this screen, what's the minority? The diamond, right? The lime green diamond. Now, you look at the rest of those circles, and they're not actually perfectly the same size. They're not actually in a line, but they sure look a whole lot more together than that lime green diamond standing right there. And so it might make you think of, so what we've been talking about, those feelings, right? It's how the diamond feels in this particular picture. I know that people haven't shared stories, but the examples that I've given, right, except maybe from our poor stepfather here, who has learned to love collards, they're momentary minorities, right? We have moments where we go into a room, might be the only one. So I'm going to give an example. I was at a conference in Chicago a week and a half ago, and I went to a work-life balance professional development session because I just think that that's important. And I saw an old colleague of mine after the session. Now, he and his wife just had their first baby. Their baby is 6 months old, and he is definitely struggling with work-life balance. And I was saying, oh, I found this session really helpful. And he said, you know, I walked in the doorway to that session, and I saw that there were 45 women and 4 men, and I just walked out. I didn't want to stay. I didn't want to be a minority. Sometimes we have a choice, and a lot of the choices we make consciously or subconsciously are because we don't have to be a minority. We want to fit in. Even if we want to be a little bit different, we don't want to have to explain why we do everything that we do all of the time. But what happens when you don't have that choice? It's really hard when you're the majority and you don't have the same right, or in the minority and you don't have the same rights as the majority. Now, the Jewish people have endured centuries and centuries of persecution, sometimes at the hands of the Christians, sometimes at the hands of the pagans, as we read about in our Hebrew Old Testament Hebrew Bible. And so it makes sense that when Theodor Herzl founded the Zionist movement in the late 1800s, they're looking to find something where they can finally be the majority, right? Where they can finally feel like they belong and they don't have to explain why they don't want to do something on a Saturday, or why they light candles in their house on a Friday night, or why, no, we really don't want to eat that bacon, thank you very much. And the Zionist movement decided that they wanted to go back to their roots, and they really wanted to create this nation called Israel. Now, Hitler managed to kill, mass murder, over 11 million people, in addition to the 6 million Jews, because he was not a fan of minorities. And he thought everyone should be part of the Aryan race. Perhaps what's more disturbing than that is if you really start looking at the materials, even if other people were not willing, either other Europeans were not willing to commit murder, they did completely overlook the Armenian genocide that had happened during World War I, and a lot of people were anti-Jewish throughout Europe in the 1930s and 40s. People get a little nervous about people who aren't like themselves. So we've got a lot of global guilt over what Hitler did, guilt about the Holocaust. We've got a Zionist movement, and the thought that a Jewish country is going to offer Jews the security and safety that they have felt denied for centuries. And what better than Israel, a land without people, for a people without a land? The story of the religiously persecuted seeking a new home should sound very familiar to us because it's something we relate to in our own history. We are very good as Americans at remembering why we came here, why a lot of our forefathers and foremothers came here to talk about the Puritans needing to free themselves of religious persecution. Maryland, the state, had a bunch of Catholics who were looking to seek religious freedom. But we don't necessarily talk about how the land that we came to wasn't exactly empty either. We do a really good job of celebrating how the Native Americans helped us through our first Thanksgiving in Plymouth Rock. And we're really good at forgetting that we completely managed to marginalize a population that covered this continent before we arrived. But if Israel wasn't an empty land, when the Jews wanted to move there, then who's there? So this is my world history in a nutshell portion of this talk. So pre-70 AD or CE, however you want to call it, Israel is essentially a vassal state under Roman rule. And we're all familiar with this from the stories we read in the New Testament. What's in the Gospels, right? Everybody was looking for a Messiah who would conquer Roman rule and create a new Israel in a free state. In 70 CE, well after Jesus has dead, buried, resurrected, Titus completely conquers Israel and there's no longer even a vassal state there. We're going to fast forward almost 2,000 years. It's 1914, 1917. We're in the middle of World War I. Britain, part of the Allied powers, is looking to beat the Ottoman Empire, who's aligned themselves with Germany, Austria. And they end up signing 3 pacts. They tell the Arabs that are living in what is the Holy Land region that's under the Ottoman Empire, hey, you know what? If you help us get these Turks out of here, we will give you your own state. Everybody says, sure. So Arabs help them conquer the Ottomans. We don't really cover that. We usually focus on the European part of the World War I here. They also, the British agreed to sign the Balfour Declaration saying, yep, Zionists, we hear you. It's great for you to have your own Jewish state. You can recreate this country called Israel. That sounds good. Sure. You can see we're starting to have a problem here. This is right when you promise your kids, all 3 of them, that you can have 1 slice of cake that's left. They can all have the full slice. Because they also signed a pact with the French. And they said, okay, look, here's the real deal. You take Lebanon and Syria, we'll take the Suez Canal and this Palestine area. And if we win the war, this is how we're going to break the thing down. Now, which pact of those 3 do you think they honored when they won the war? The one that benefited them. Great. So the British Empire expands. You do have some more Jews who are coming into the Palestine Mandate area. But who's there before these Eastern Europeans come in? You've got 650,000 Arabs. Now these Arabs are Jewish, they're Muslim, and they're Christian, and they've been there for centuries. Okay? They've been there. There are already people in this land without people. Already people there. So continue on. British are occupying the area for a while. Hitler gets defeated. And self-determination spreads around the world. Has anybody heard this term before, self-determination? Okay, right? It's this belief that my group of people in my nation deserve to have their own country. We deserve to have a nation state. And this is not just going on in the Middle East. This is everywhere in the world. Okay, after World War II, we create the United Nations. Indonesia gets liberated from the Netherlands. The British Empire is crumbling around the globe.
Except for Vietnam.
Yes.
Except for Vietnam, it was given back.
Right, but Indonesia is in Southeast Asia, the islands were free. So I'm not saying that every single place immediately gets free in 45, that's not true, but this idea is spreading. It's really vibrant around the world throughout Africa. And so, what does Israel look like? So if we look at the first left pane over here, this is kind of what Israel looks like and Palestine looks like in 1946. There's no state of Israel yet. Arab-controlled Palestinian land is green. Jewish-owned land is white. Okay? So the British, as I said, their empire is crumbling. They're not really able to contain the unrest that is happening in Palestine. And so they kind of announced to the UN, yeah, we think we're going to get out of here. And the UN says, okay, well, we've got two different groups here. We're going to recommend Resolution 47, the partition plan for Palestine. This is exemplified in the second panel. They're suggesting that they break it in half. The Arab League says, no way. Well, why would they say no to this? Yeah. The Jews are currently owning 7% of the land. And the UN recommendation is to give 57% of that land to the Jews. And the Arab, Palestinian, Muslims, the Christians who are living there can have the rest. When you look at it, they're a lot of that actually is the Negev desert. It's not very farmable. So it's kind of not a good deal. Unsurprisingly, the Jews were like, yeah, we can split this, that's fine. That sounds good. They're getting a little bit better of a deal. So this goes back and forth, and the resolution is never really adopted by the people who live there. And the British just say, look, we're getting out on this day. May 14th, 1948, we are out of here. Our goal, we're not going to work with your coalition government. We're not going to try, we're just going to get out. This is the day we're going to move our troops out. Next day, war breaks out, right? You have the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. At the end of that war, you end up with panel number 3. So looking back in history, you're like, oh, maybe they should have got that UN resolution plan. But when you're currently in number 1, number 2 might not look like the greatest deal. So the third panel is what Israel and Palestine look like up through the 6 Days War in 1967. And that is when Israel defeats the Jordanians and the Egyptians, gets the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, Gaza, and the West Bank. So under international law, Gaza and the West Bank are militarily occupied zones. They are not considered part of Israel. That is not how some Israelis see that, however. And what they've been doing since the late 60s is trying to ensure, parts of the government have been trying to ensure that they can carve up the West Bank a little bit more. So what you see over here on the fourth panel is white is the Israeli, what's called the green line, which is the third panel, as well as the occupied lands in the West Bank, and the parts that are under strong Israeli control. So the green parts are Palestinian authority under the Israeli military. But what you see in the West Bank are there are a lot of roads that you can't go on if you have a Palestinian license plate instead of an Israeli license plate. The roads that are only accessible to Israelis, there are parts of the area that are only accessible to Israelis. And so that's why the fourth panel is a little bit broken up. So let's go back to our minority diamond and ask, what minority are we talking about here? Well, we have the Palestinians who were exiled, forced out of their homes during the 48 war, haven't been allowed back. That's 750,000 of them at the time. A lot of them are living in minorities in Jordan, in Egypt, in other countries. Many are living in Gaza and the West Bank. That's one group. You have the minority of Arab Israelis. These are people who have Palestinian non-Jewish heritage, but who are in fact considered Israeli citizens. They have passports. They're actually 20% of the Israeli population, which a lot of people don't know. You have the Christian minority, or as my friends there like to say, the minority of the minority. Less than 1.5% of the Palestinian population in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza is actually Christian still. A lot of people have emigrated because of being the minority of the minorities. If you look at the region as the whole, however, the Jewish state is a minority, right? And the people who live there who are Jewish are very aware that nowhere else in the world are they a majority, right? Nowhere else in the world are they a majority. Can they have a lifestyle that fits with their cultural heritage? And so when you think about all these different groups, you think about the fact that they are all feeling the feelings that we talked about earlier. Isolation, confusion, frustration, fear, like they don't belong. Even the Jews that are running, that are the majority in their country are very aware that this is the only place where they fit in. Kind of like if you were me and you were a geek in school. You had your group of friends who are all also crazy dorks who love studying, but everybody else in the school wasn't like that. So, you find your place, you got to realize that. So I do want to take a couple of minutes to talk about what I learned while being part of the minority. I was the only American for most of the time I was there in my village. I never felt so out of place sometimes trying to explain things that I thought were really basic. Here I am with my students, and one of the things that I learned, one of the first things, was that minorities just get less attention. And that sounds really basic, we all know that, but living it's a little bit different. The school that I worked at was actually founded by the priest, the local priest, because the Israeli government hadn't built any schools by the 1980s in this Arab village. So they were being bused really far away, and that's always hard. Second, identity has increased significantly when you're a minority. I have a lot of stories, but I'll just go with the work week one. So today is Sunday, and we've all just gone to a wonderful service here at St. Mary's. But when I was in Israel, the work week is Sunday through Thursday or Friday morning. So churches have to choose. If a lot of their congregation works for Jewish companies, they might have a service in the morning on Sunday for people who are working for Arab countries or companies or own their own shops, and they can take off Sunday morning. But most places are going to have a Saturday night service or a Sunday night service. So the church I went to had a Sunday night service. There are a lot of places are kosher in Israel, and so, man, I got to the point where I just wanted to walk into a store and order a grilled ham and cheese. And let's not even talk about how much I missed Eastern North Carolina barbecue, which was really painful because there are 8 places in Israel that are sanctioned to raise pigs. And I was sort of close to one because I could smell them on a nice warm day. But there was no Eastern North Carolina barbecue. And I couldn't really explain to anyone what that was, and they couldn't sort of share with me that moment of missing that. And it sounds silly, but for those of you who've been far away from home, it kind of does matter.
Question.
Yes?
Weren't those 8 facilities, aren't they kind of raised off?
Yes, they're raised off so they don't touch the ground. Yes. But that is why they've sort of built everything. I'm very impressed if you need that. Awesome. All right. So, any other questions so far?
What's the name of the school?
Mar Elias Elementary and High Schools. So I was going to talk a little bit more about that at the end, but this is a great time. So these schools were started by former Archbishop Eli Shakur. He wrote the book Blood Brothers, which I do recommend to everyone. It's a wonderful book. He's a Palestinian Christian. And he was sent by his archbishop to this little town for a couple of months. 25 years later, he's still there. And he started a high school, and then they started an elementary school. And so while the schools are private, they're about 10% of what other private schools in the area cost. They have some of the best scores for testing of all the schools in Israel. And it's $250 for students to go there a year. And 65% of the students who go there are on scholarship because that's too expensive for what their parents have. So it's technically a Melkite Christian school, but it focuses on peace and reconciliation. The high school faculty includes Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Druze. But the high school population of this Christian school is 70% Muslim, 30% Christian. So really, the Arab population with the Muslims and the Christians, they really have to learn to live together. And even though they do have differences, because they share more of a shared identity than they do. Yes, Father Michael?
Most of us have stereotypical needs of Muslims. Can you kind of share maybe what your best encounter was and maybe was not your best encounter?
So many good encounters. All right. This is one of my favorite stories. I'm going to go back to the beginning. All right, so you might be able to find me and my friend Katie in this picture. Katie was a volunteer for 3 months, so I was there for a year. And we actually had a wonderful American Muslim family whose 2 parents both had a PhD. They had 5 girls, and they came to volunteer for a couple of months at the school. And they had a lot of friends in the Galilee area. And so they had sort of adopted us, these poor 2 single women in their mid-20s who obviously couldn't do anything by themselves. That was just everyone's mentality, right? Oh, bless your heart, you don't have a family. We'll just come into ours. I got a lot of that. Yeah, not married, don't have children. You've got to take you in. You don't have your own family. You've got to become part of ours. I think I said to Father Michael earlier that, in fact, I hate to say it to all of you, but the Palestinians beat us in hospitality. And this story is a great example. So Katie and I are hanging out in my room. I have a bedroom as a volunteer, and we get a call from Haitham, the father in this family, and he says, "We were at dinner at our friend's house, okay? And they said we must invite you to dinner." So what had happened is they were having dinner and they were speaking in English, and the mother of the family had said, well, maybe we could take the girls some leftovers so they can have some of this really wonderful home-cooked local food. And the hostess understood what she said, and they got in trouble for not bringing us. And they were saying, well, we didn't know how many people you were going to have. We didn't want to be in a position. They're like, no. So they had to drive 30 minutes to come get us. We were in yoga pants, and we'd already had dinner. So we were, like, rushing to change into something that looks presentable. That sort of does. And we were invited to this family. We had to stay. And everybody, when we got there, everyone in the family's there. There are 30 people in the room. This is most of everyone, but not everyone. Everyone brings this into the house. They've all finished eating at this point, right? It's an hour later. They pull out all the food. They sit us down. We take pictures of being spoon-fed by the mother of this house. She explains to us that she is now our mother while we are there. And anything we need, just let her know. I swear, I collected so many mothers while I was in Israel. But that's the level of hospitality that you encounter. It's really, really amazing. Yes, Steph?
Was the olive oil any good there?
Okay, yeah, my family's heard a lot about how I became an olive oil snob while I was there. It has a really amazing sort of tangy zing to it, so I don't like Italian olive oil anymore. So I actually go to an Eastern market in D.C. and get my Lebanese olive oil. Thanks for helping me share that story. Okay. I mentioned this earlier. I was very much a fish out of water. For the 10 months I was there, I was unmarried at 24. This was not as big of a deal, I will point out, to some of my friends who were getting married at 28, as it was to some of my students who clearly thought I was about to need to sign up for AARP. There, you know, one of the guys was like, well, my sister is 21 and she just had her first kid. And I'm like, okay, I'm not telling everybody that my boyfriend of 4.5 years and I just broke up so I could come do this, right? You know, just not, maybe not going to mention that I'm that low on the totem pole. But, you know, so I was unmarried, so I didn't really understand. So you're in this sort of weird position in traditional society, not just in Israel. I've traveled a lot since then, where they don't quite know what to do with you. Because all the women your age are at least married. They might not have kids yet, but they're at least married, or they're engaged, or, I mean, I really swear of all the teachers who were 25 that I taught with were at least engaged at the school I was at, right? Because that's just the time frame that everybody's on. And I finally just got tired of hearing, well, why? You're so nice. Why aren't you married? And I finally said, it's American boys. I thought so too. It took me months to come up with that. But I'm very much a fish out of water, even in church on Sunday, because all the church services are conducted in Arabic. Now, people might tell you that in the Middle East, nothing is final until it's actually done. And so they don't do a lot of pre-planning. Now, I take after my mother. I'm a real planner, and my grandmother who's sitting here, real planner. So the fact that I decided to go to a country where I don't speak either of the two languages, Hebrew and Arabic are not that easy. Okay. But I just thought I'd do it. I thought this sounded like, I just felt that this was the right thing to do. So this is very atypical for me, but very in keeping with the culture that I was about to be immersed in. But I thought, well, I've gone to a lot of Catholic Mass, I'll be fine. It's a Greek Catholic church. Well, their services are Orthodox services. I've never been to an Orthodox service before. Everything's in Arabic. 10 months later, I still sort of haven't figured out when prayers of the people are. But I think I know because we repeat a lot of stuff at this one particular place, but it's at the beginning of the service. So, you know, I think I went to one service in English the whole time I was there. So this is Abuna, who at this time is Archbishop. Well, the whole year that I'm there, he just retired on my birthday, the end of January this year. He's 75. You're allowed to retire as Archbishop at 75, and he put his paper in as soon as he could. It's a really, really demanding job there. It's a really demanding job. He's a wonderful man. So here he is, and you can see that he actually is holding candles, and they sort of hold the candles, and one has 2 candles coming up, and one has 3. And I must have asked like 5 of the nuns, and no one could explain to me what it is, but I've decided one's the Trinity, one's the New and Old Testament. So it may be true, may not be. I may be projecting onto the Orthodox faith. If anyone knows the answer, please tell me. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, there's a lot of joy. While being a minority, we talked about being confused and frustrated. They would have loved the end of the service today. They would have loved it. They are all about having fun and being joyful and just enjoying and living in the moment in a way that I came to admire and wish that I could do more of. So here are 4 pictures of my time in Israel. The top one on the left are some of my students. They always brought a cake for anyone's birthday. They brought a cake and surprised me on my birthday, and it had these big sort of flaring candles, and the first thing I thought is, are those allowed in school? You know, just a wonderful surprise birthday party for me. They're great, great kids. The second one of the families that adopted me, one of the Christian families, took me to the Dead Sea for New Year's Eve. So that's us dancing the night away. We had a great time. Below that is a traditional shaving party. It's the groom's party before the wedding, and you can see that the goal is really to get as much shaving cream on everyone as possible. It's a lot of fun. And then the last one in the corner, I was actually really blessed to be able to go to a Brit, which is a circumcision ceremony in a Jewish Orthodox community. And that was really amazing. So I did really try to go and appreciate some of the Jewish culture, even if I was very much immersed in the Muslim and Christian culture where I was in Galilee. But to get back to Father Michael's question earlier, in these two pictures, there is a Jew, 2 Christians, and 2 Muslims. So who can tell me who's who? Anyone want to guess? So what I'm trying to get at here is that if people aren't wearing something that shows you which religion they belong to, people really do look pretty similar. Now my hair was light enough that everybody thought I was Jewish. I found out that I'm a blonde. Had no idea. But my hair is considered that light. But a lot of the Muslims, so I will tell you, my friend and her son are Muslim. She was one of the English teachers with me. Inam and her brother-in-law are Christians, and that's his Jewish son. He married a lovely Jewish woman called Habiba, who's Moroccan Jewish, and they all look right like their families. So I just want to make that point because that's often surprising to people. And in closing, there are a lot of problems in the Middle East, and there are a lot of problems in Israel-Palestine. There are a lot of problems with being a minority or feeling that you are. And this quote of Abuna's, who again, former Archbishop that I worked for, amazing man, if you look at the whole picture in the Holy Land, you can feel hopeless. But hope is in the details. You can see life eased, hope alive, in one life, one family, one school. So thank you.
When Sandra and I lived in Maryland, we went to a Christian church that had a big hall, and we invited a group of Muslims to come, and they used that hall for their place to pray, and that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's really amazing when you have the chance to kind of have that sort of community interaction on a routine level and not just sort of a one-off. That's wonderful. Did anyone else have questions or thoughts or questions for other stories? Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
not really informed, but I was just saying, Muslims that pray during the day, how do y'all incorporate that into the school when you've had partial Muslim, partial Christian?
Yep, that is a wonderful question. So our school actually, to the chagrin of parents who worked the Sunday through Friday morning work week, we closed on Sundays because we were a Christian school, and we closed on Fridays, which is the big day of prayer. We did have a break around lunch, but one thing is I think we all, like before I went there, I definitely thought, right, everyone who is Muslim prays 5 times a day. Everyone who is Muslim probably at least wears the hijab and covers her hair. If she's female, all the men must grow beards. But just like with Christianity, and if you're really familiar with Judaism, just like with Judaism, there's a wide range. And so I actually had some friends who were very devout, who never covered their hair. They saw it as a personal choice, whether that they still viewed that as a need for modesty or not. There were women who chose to cover at 22. They suddenly felt that that was a big deal. There were women who, when they turned 13, it was, that was sort of a rite of passage to show you were an adult. So there's a wide variety there. So same with the prayer. Some might pray 5 times a day. Some of the people that I knew also considered those times to be a little bit more flexible than others. But we did have a break at noon, and noon prayer is considered the big one of the day. Great question. Anyone got any others?
Was there any time when you were there that you felt threatened in any way?
Well, I think what you should ask is, did my mother feel that I was threatened in any way? My mom's really awesome.
I won't ask that question.
All right, so I will answer honestly. I was there during the 2008-2009 Gaza war, and that was pretty intense. And they, so they were launching rockets from Gaza into the south, and I wasn't really worried for me because I knew that they didn't have the capability to reach all the way to the north, which is where I was. So I kept trying to assure my mom on the phone, right? Well, I know I'm only 4 hours from the fighting, but I'm 4 hours away from 3 hours away from where the rockets could possibly hit me. This did not work. If anyone's going to try this, that did not work. But my best friend, one of my best friends who's Jewish, was studying in Beersheba University. We were roommates in college, and she was constantly having air raids, and her room was the shelter in the apartment that she shared with some friends, and they were definitely getting rockets. So every time there was a rocket launch, I mean, we had weeks where you couldn't call, you couldn't get the cell phone to go because all the towers were jammed because everyone was calling Beersheba. And I made a pact with the Archbishop and my mother that if Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, which I could see from my bedroom window, opened fire, then I would come home. So I kept making lesson plans, and I wasn't sure if things were going to escalate and if I was going to get to stay or if I was going to be sent home on the next plane. That was a unique experience. I think the only time that I would say I ever felt scared in any way was there are not as many bombings in shopping malls and such as people make out, right? A little scary. And Dennis found that article and showed it to my mother.
Look at Dennis.
I see another question. Yes, sir.
What are people of concern that you dealt with? What was their attitude about Africa?
So I was there. Let's see. I was there in 2008, 2009. In the village that I was in, people were thrilled that Obama got elected. This is the first time Obama got elected. And they were so excited because they really felt that he was going to hold Israel accountable for the growth of settlements in the West Bank, and they really thought that Obama was going to make a difference. And I didn't really have the heart to explain to them that with a massive recession in the U.S. and 2 wars fronts being fought, Israel and Palestine were at best number 4 on his agenda and likely a little lower because, you know, it's what's on fire the most. So there was a lot of positiveness. I will say that I spent quite a lot of time trying to explain to people that High School Musical was not my life. And I mean, it's funny, right? My students really thought that that's how my high school was. But in all seriousness, there was a lot of combating American media and trying to explain that everything that people saw on TV, which is their only window to the U.S., and my students could quote more pop stars than I could. They knew a lot more about our culture. So because our culture is out there, I mean, I would go into restaurants and I would hear American music playing everywhere. People really think they know the breadth of America. And that's not true. So I spent a lot of time just trying to explain all sorts of things that I never thought.
Live Hollywood, huh?
Yeah, life is not Hollywood.
Cowboys are not everywhere. Yeah.
They didn't worry about the Cowboys as much. I did have to, explain, that not everyone was as amoral as some of the people in some of the movies. Maybe amoral might be a little strong, but that was interesting. So people definitely knew a lot about our country. I didn't have anyone who said, I hate America or anything like that. Everybody was very welcoming. They were very thrilled that I was there. They considered it a really great honor that I had taken a year off, and they kept trying to tell me, we don't do anything like this in our community. We don't have this kind of volunteering. This is so amazing. And I really disagreed. I felt like they don't need to go international because they help each other out so much locally. You know, I think about what I hear about communities from earlier in the 20th century, and that's really what I saw there, right? You know, you would babysit your cousins and you would never ask money. Everybody's extended family is in the village that you're in, or they're just the next village over. This was funny. I have been gone for 9 months. I had not seen my mother in those 9 months, right? And I had a 42-year-old woman complaining to me because it had been a whole week since she had seen her mom. And I was like, you're 42, you have teenagers. I haven't seen my mom in 9 months. You know, but of course I tried to sympathize with her, but I internally was just like, lady, you have no idea. It gets a lot harder. So, but yeah, everybody was really wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
If you didn't speak Arabic or Hebrew, how did you communicate? Was there enough English spoken that you could?
So that's great. So my Arabic, shwai, little by little, sort of grew to the point where I could point out all the foods at the table. That was key. Because if people are in this really dynamic conversation, they won't even notice if you say, like, pass me the bread in Arabic. They won't notice that you're using your Arabic, but you get the bread. If you ask for it in English, even if they speak English, you're not getting the bread. So I did learn a little bit, but English is actually taught in Israel as the third language. So if you're of Arab Palestinian descent, you're going to speak Arabic at home. Just like if you were Hispanic here, you would probably speak Spanish at home. The Arabic schools are taught in Arabic. The formal Arabic is almost like a different language compared to the dialect that everybody speaks, and the dialect changes from region to region. I heard a lot of people tell me, oh, you say that word like my mother's village, which is not the village they lived in, because it's whoever taught me the word. So a lot of diversity in Arabic. Hebrew, they start learning in 2nd grade if they're, and then English is started in 3rd grade. So everyone loved talking to me in English, except their English sometimes was what I knew in Arabic. So we got to hi, how are you, thank you, and we were done. But that wasn't enough for them, right? They still wanted me to come to their house, even if we sat silently and have coffee with them, because they wanted to make me feel welcome. But as far as having deep conversations about how things were, I was limited to people who were fluent in English or willing to try.
So were you teaching English in school? Or?
Oh yes, I was teaching English in English. This is really, I've got a lot of stories. I got the English honors classes for 4 months while someone was on maternity leave. They didn't have another teacher who could teach it, and I had to teach those classes because they're the only ones I could. I tried some others, long story. I had a girl who, bless her heart, at the end of the first day, started crying to me because this was her very first English honors class. And she had really struggled with English, and she was really trying to get better. And I had just talked to her for 50 minutes in English. And unlike the other English teachers, I wasn't local, so I couldn't give her the Arabic word for something. And she was in tears. She thought she was going to fail my class. At the end of 4 months with them, they had these national exams, and so they had to listen to a reading passage and answer questions in English. Okay, we've all done this, right? If you learn a second language, and so we play the tape, and the woman on the tape sounds like this. And so we play it once, and I say, okay, everyone, I'm going to play it again for you. And they stopped me, and they said, no, Miss Kathryn, we got it. If we can listen to you, because at that point I was talking at about this speed. They said, we know you. And they actually, when their teacher came back, they asked to bump up the level of work that they were doing. So there ended up being good that I couldn't speak to them in Arabic, but it definitely limited what I could do to help out at the school. Anyone else? Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all very much.